I can't even begin to describe the creeping dread that sets in when you're alone in a hospital, the silence almost suffocating. The kind of silence that eats at your sanity. My name is Jason, and I've been working the night shift at St. Mary's Hospital for almost 5 years. I never thought I'd be writing this, but here I am, barely able to sleep, terrified by what I've seen. It started off like any other shift. I was the only one in the ER, everyone else was either in their offices or at home, enjoying the peace of the night while I kept watch over a cold, empty emergency room. It was 2:15 a.m., the lights flickered, and I was ready to let out a sigh of relief. It was going to be one of those uneventful nights, where everything was quiet, and I could just breeze through the shift without so much as a hiccup. That's when the door slammed open. A man rushed in, covered in blood. His clothes were shredded, his eyes wide with panic. I stood up quickly, my heart racing. I asked him what happened, but he could barely speak. He was mumbling something incoherent. His fingers twitched as if he was trying to point at something, but all I could make out were wild, desperate movements. "Help, help me," he gasped, falling onto the floor in a heap. I immediately called for the nurses to get the emergency kit, and while waiting for them to arrive, I noticed something strange. The man had deep cuts across his arms, and what looked like bite marks, torn into his flesh. There was something wrong with his eyes, something unnatural. They were black, completely devoid of any light. I looked closer, but before I could get any further, one of the nurses, Kelly, walked in. I was about to tell her what I'd seen, but she looked right at me, her face going pale. "Jason, look at his hands." I turned, and my stomach dropped. His fingers were unnaturally long, almost skeletal. They twitched again, but this time, it wasn't the man's doing. It was as if something else was controlling him. Something far more sinister. Before I could process what was happening, the man shot up from the floor, screaming, and bolted out of the room like a wild animal. The sound of his footsteps echoed down the hall. Kelly and I stood frozen, staring at the door. "What the hell was that?" I muttered under my breath. Kelly didn't answer. She just grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the hallway. "We need to find him. He's dangerous." I followed, my pulse pounding in my ears. But there was nothing. No sign of him anywhere. The hallways were empty, eerily so. The air was thick, suffocating. Then, we heard it. A low growl, coming from the dark end of the corridor. It sent chills down my spine, and I knew without a doubt that whatever we were dealing with wasn't human. We crept down the hallway, Kelly whispering for us to be quiet. My breath was shallow, every nerve on edge. That's when I saw it. The man was standing in the corner, but something was off. His head was tilted at an impossible angle, his eyes still pitch black. The skin on his arms and neck had been pulled tight, like it was stretching over something underneath. Something moving. Before I could call out to him, he turned sharply. His face was twisted in a grotesque expression, a mixture of agony and rage. Then, the growl returned, louder this time. And it was coming from him. Kelly screamed and backed away, but I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, unable to tear my eyes away from the horrifying figure. It wasn't just the man anymore. Something else was controlling him. Something dark, something ancient. Then, with an almost inhuman speed, he lunged toward us. It all happened so fast. Kelly pushed me out of the way, and I felt the cold air rush past as the man, or whatever it was, charged past us, disappearing into the darkness. "Run!" Kelly yelled. I didn't need to be told twice. We both bolted down the hallway, but the further we went, the more the feeling of dread grew. It was as if the hospital itself was closing in on us. The walls seemed to shift, the lights flickering like they were alive, pulsing with some kind of twisted rhythm. We reached the security office, but there was no sign of the man. Only the faint smell of something rotten, decayed. It filled the room, overwhelming me. Then, the door slammed shut behind us. We turned around. There was nothing. Just the smell, thick and suffocating. "I've never seen anything like this," Kelly said, her voice trembling. "This isn't just a person. It's something else. Something that shouldn't be here." The lights flickered again, and I could hear whispers coming from the walls. Low, guttural voices. They weren't human, either. And then, just as quickly as it all started, the whispers stopped. I looked at Kelly, and she looked back at me. We were trapped. In the middle of a hospital that had become a nightmare. "There's no way out of here," I thought. And that's when I heard it. A slow, deliberate tapping. Coming from the direction of the ER. The tapping grew louder, closer. Something was coming for us. We didn't move. We didn't even breathe. Whatever it was hungry. The tapping continued, each echo a relentless reminder that whatever was out there was drawing nearer. My heart raced, and I couldn't help but feel like I was being stalked, like prey caught in the crosshairs of something ancient and hungry. I glanced at Kelly, her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. She was frozen in place, barely able to keep her breath steady. "Do you hear that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I nodded, unable to speak. The tapping was getting louder now, sharper, like nails scraping against the floor. We stayed completely still, listening to the rhythmic sound as it grew closer. I turned to the security cameras, hoping for some kind of answer. The monitors were static, nothing but black and white fuzz. It felt like the entire hospital was blocking us from seeing anything. I tried adjusting the cameras, but each shift was met with more static. Then, the tapping stopped. For a brief, terrifying moment, there was only silence. Absolute silence. I looked at Kelly, my breath shallow. "Where is it? What is it?" Before she could answer, the door to the security office slammed open with such force it rattled the walls. We both jumped, and I instinctively pulled Kelly behind me. The hallway was empty, no man, no shadow, just darkness. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, waiting. "Jason, we need to get out of here." Now, Kelly pleaded, but I wasn't sure we could. The exit was too far. We were trapped in the heart of the hospital with something far more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash from the other side of the room. I spun around to see the large storage cabinet had toppled over, and something was moving inside it. The cabinet doors creaked open, inch by inch, as if some unseen force was pulling them back. I motioned for Kelly to stay quiet, holding my breath. There, in the shadows, I saw a figure, hunched over. It was the man, the one who had come in earlier, but now, he was different. His face was even more grotesque, contorted into an inhuman grimace, and his limbs were twisted in ways that shouldn't have been possible. And those eyes. Those empty, black eyes stared at me like they could see through me, down to my very soul. It was as though he was aware of everything I feared. But what was worse was the smell, something rotting, something decayed. "Kelly," I whispered, but she was already backing away. She grabbed my arm, her grip tight with panic. "We need to go now." But as we turned toward the door, the lights flickered again, and this time they didn't come back on. The entire hallway was submerged in darkness, save for the faint glow from the emergency exit sign. Then, the growl returned. Low, guttural, and primal. It wasn't just the man anymore. Whatever was in him was no longer content with hiding in the shadows. It was awake, and it was coming for us. "Jason, we can't outrun it," Kelly gasped, her eyes wide with terror. I knew she was right, but there was no other choice. I grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the hallway. The silence was deafening now. Every step felt like a lifetime, each breath a struggle. But as we made it to the hallway, I realized something. There were no sounds, no footsteps, no growling. Just, nothing. I turned to Kelly. Where did it go? Before she could respond, the hospital's intercom buzzed to life. It was faint at first, the static crackling through the speaker, but then it became clear. A voice, distorted and distorted. You can't escape. It's already inside. I froze, my blood running cold. I spun around, but the hallway was still empty. The doors were closed, locked. There was no way out. But it wasn't just the man that was chasing us. It was something much older, something far worse, that had taken hold of this place. Suddenly, the lights came back on. But what I saw next will haunt me forever. At the far end of the hallway, standing perfectly still, was the man, his form even more twisted than before. He was no longer human. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his body seemed to be growing, stretching in unnatural ways. The air around him crackled, and there was a palpable weight to it, as though the very atmosphere had shifted into something darker. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I watched in horror as his mouth opened wide, impossibly wide, and from within came a sound, an otherworldly screech, like 1,000 tortured souls screaming in agony. Kelly screamed, and we ran. But the darkness followed. Every hallway we turned down seemed to stretch on forever, the walls closing in. The hospital, it seemed, had become a maze, designed to trap us in its nightmare. The lights flickered again, and we found ourselves back in the same hallway we had just run through. The door to the ER was now open, wide enough to let us through, but we knew better. It was a trap. I looked at Kelly. We can't go that way. We need to find the stairs. We turned down another corridor, but then I heard something behind us. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, as if whatever was hunting us was toying with us. The tapping. That godforsaken tapping. I glanced behind me. The man, or whatever he had become, was standing there, in the doorway, watching us. And then, the growl. So close. So final. This was it. There was nowhere left to run. I grabbed Kelly's hand tighter. We have to fight. We don't have a choice. She nodded, her face pale, her hands shaking, but there was determination in her eyes. We weren't going down without a fight. The air felt thick, suffocating, as I pulled Kelly toward the stairwell. Every step was slower than the last, the sound of our hurried footsteps drowned out by the growling that seemed to vibrate through the walls. I could hear it now, the thing that was after us. It wasn't just growling anymore. It was whispering, a rasping voice, unintelligible but insistent, wrapping around my thoughts. We reached the stairwell door, but as I swung it open, the temperature dropped instantly. The chill was unbearable, like we were suddenly standing at the edge of an abyss. The stairwell was dark, so dark I couldn't see more than a few steps ahead. Jason, what if we're just leading it straight to us? Kelly's voice trembled. I didn't have an answer. I didn't know if there was a safe place, or if we were just running in circles, playing right into whatever this thing wanted. But standing there in that corridor with the growls growing louder behind us, we didn't have a choice. We stepped into the stairwell. The door slammed shut behind us with a sound that echoed through the empty hospital, and for a moment, there was only the sound of our breathing. It was almost too quiet. I tried to calm myself, but the unease gnawed at the back of my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being hunted. Not by the man, but by something far more ancient, far more malevolent than anything I'd ever imagined. We made our way up the stairs, trying to move as quietly as possible. But then, I heard it again, the tapping. It was coming from below us now, just outside the stairwell. It wasn't the sound of footsteps anymore. It was faster, sharper, almost like claws scraping against metal. And it was growing louder. Closer. I glanced at Kelly. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with terror. She was breathing heavily, but she didn't say anything. There was no need. We both knew that whatever was chasing us had found its way into the stairwell. I pushed myself harder, forcing my legs to move, but every step felt like it was taking us deeper into some kind of nightmare. We had to get to the roof. We had to get out of here. But the tapping continued, relentless and unyielding. Then, a door slammed open at the bottom of the stairwell. I froze. In the dim light, I saw the shadow. It was huge, distorted, like something out of a fevered dream. It loomed in the doorway, blacker than the darkness around it, its outline unnatural. I could feel it staring at me, even though I couldn't see its eyes. "Run," Kelly whispered, barely able to form the word. I didn't need to hear it twice. We bolted up the stairs as fast as we could. Every step felt like it might be our last. But as we neared the top, something else happened. The lights flickered again, and when they came back on, the hallway at the top of the stairs was different. The walls were cracked, the ceiling buckling in strange ways. The emergency exit sign glowed a sickly green, casting an eerie light across the floor. We reached the door at the top of the stairwell, and I pushed it open. It wasn't a rooftop. It was a hallway. I gasped. This wasn't right. We were on the 6th floor. There was no hallway here. The roof was above us. But instead of the cold night air, I was looking at sterile white walls, identical to the ones below. And I could feel it. That presence. It was here. Inside. It was like we had crossed some invisible threshold. We weren't just in the hospital anymore. We were in something else. A twisted version of the hospital, distorted by whatever dark force had taken over this place. "What the hell is this?" Kelly asked, her voice barely a whisper. I shook my head. This isn't real. This can't be real. But the growl, the low rumble that sent vibrations through the floor, told me otherwise. We weren't alone. And this wasn't just a hospital. This place had become something else entirely, something that was never meant to exist. And then, we heard it. A door creaked open in the distance, the sound of it scraping against the floor like an old, rusted hinge. Someone, was coming toward us. But it wasn't human. It stepped into the dim light. It was the man again. No longer looking even remotely human. His limbs were twisted, bone cracking and reshaping in grotesque angles. His skin was almost transparent, veins bulging beneath the surface like worms wriggling beneath dead skin. His eyes were gone, replaced by two hollow sockets that seemed to breathe with an unnatural rhythm. His mouth stretched wide, unnervingly wide, exposing rows of teeth that looked too many and too sharp. He didn't move like a man anymore. He moved like a predator. A thing that was not bound by human form. And he was hungry. I grabbed Kelly's arm and pulled her toward the closest door, my breath ragged and heart pounding. But just as we reached for the handle, the thing lunged. It moved faster than I could react, its grotesque mouth opening to reveal teeth too large, too sharp for anything human. We screamed as it grabbed Kelly's arm, pulling her toward its mouth. She fought, kicked, screamed, but it was useless. The thing was impossibly strong. I lunged forward, grabbing at her, but it was like trying to hold on to smoke. I could feel the force pulling us apart, the thing's grip suffocating. With all the strength I had, I shoved my hand into its mouth, cold, slimy, like it had no business being real, and I felt something snap. The thing recoiled, a horrific scream rattling the walls. It let go of Kelly, but before we could escape, its clawed hand shot out, grabbing me by the throat. I gasped for air, feeling my vision blur. My body was going numb. I wasn't sure if I was going to die here, in this twisted nightmare, or if the thing was going to drag me into whatever hell it came from. Then, just as quickly as it grabbed me, it released. The thing was gone. Just, gone. The hallway was empty again, but the coldness remained. The quiet lingered. Kelly pulled me to my feet, her face drenched in sweat and terror. "Jason, it's not over. It's still here," she said, her voice shaking. I nodded, my throat tight, my body trembling. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't going to stop. And we weren't going to survive unless we figured out how to stop it first. I looked at her, and the only words I could muster were, "We have to find the way out. Before it finds us again." I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time, running out of options. The hospital, no, this twisted version of it, was alive. It wasn't just the walls that felt wrong. It was everything. The floors creaked beneath our feet, the air heavy with an unnatural coldness, as if we were being watched by something far older than the building itself. Kelly and I stumbled through the hallway, our breaths shallow, footsteps echoing too loudly in the silence. I glanced at the windows, there was nothing out there. No city lights, no stars. Just an abyss of darkened sky. "Jason, what the hell is happening?" Kelly asked, her voice thin and terrified. "This place, it's changing." I didn't have an answer. I was too busy trying to piece together whatever was happening. The way the halls shifted, the way the hospital felt, it was like something had hijacked it, turned it into a nightmare. It felt like we were inside something that wasn't just alive but waiting for us, watching our every move. We reached another set of doors. The sign above it read patient rooms. The hall was eerily quiet, too quiet, but something made me hesitate. A low humming sound, distant and almost imperceptible, vibrated through the walls. I turned to Kelly. She was looking at the door too, her face pale with dread. "Do you hear that?" I asked, barely a whisper. She nodded, her eyes wide. "It's coming from inside." Before I could stop her, Kelly grabbed the door handle. I reached for her arm to pull her back, but it was too late. The door swung open. Inside the room, the air was thick with the smell of decay, like something had been left to rot in there for days. But what made me freeze was the figure in the bed. It wasn't a patient. It wasn't human. The thing in the bed, if you could even call it that, was distorted beyond recognition. Its body was contorted, skin stretched too tight, like something had been forcibly stuffed into the shell of a human form. Its fingers were unnaturally long, curled into grotesque claws, and its face, what was left of it, was a mask of agony. Eyes that were no longer eyes, just dark voids, stared at us. Its mouth was wide open, but no sound came out, only a low, rasping breath. We both stepped back, horrified, as the thing in the bed slowly began to move. It shifted, its limbs jerking in unnatural angles, and with a bone-chilling hiss, it sat up. "Kelly, get back!" I shouted, grabbing her arm and pulling her away from the door. But she froze, staring at the thing as it writhed. It let out a sound, an inhuman screech, like nails on a chalkboard, and then, it slowly began to climb out of the bed, each movement jerky and twitching. The walls around us began to hum louder, vibrating with each second as the thing's shadow stretched across the room. Suddenly, the room seemed to darken even more, the light flickering violently, and the hospital groaned around us. It was as if the building itself was alive, shifting, changing, feeding off whatever dark presence was inside. My pulse raced. I couldn't breathe. "We need to go, now." Kelly screamed, her voice cracking with panic. She tugged at my arm, and I didn't think twice. We bolted from the room, slamming the door behind us. But the sound followed. The thing was crawling, dragging itself along the floor, the screeching noises growing louder with every second. It was too fast. It was too close. We ran down the hallway, our hearts pounding in our chests. But no matter how fast we moved, it felt like we were stuck in place. The building shifted around us, twisting the hallways, turning them into impossible labyrinths. I tried to push through the fear, trying to think, trying to focus on anything that could get us out of here. The emergency exit sign above us flickered, and I realized we had come full circle. We were back at the stairwell. The one that led to nowhere. The growl returned. The thing we had encountered earlier, the one with hollow eyes and jagged teeth, was back. This time, I saw it more clearly. Its skin was now slick and black, like tar, dripping down its twisted form. Its hands were too big, its fingers elongated, the claws scraping against the floor with every step. It wasn't alone. There were others, emerging from the shadows. Figures that had once been human, but now, they were just twisted, empty versions of people, grotesque and monstrous. The hallway seemed to stretch impossibly long, the walls closing in, but there was no way out. "Jason, we're going to die here," Kelly whispered, her voice barely audible. "No, we're not," I said, though my heart was beating in my throat. I couldn't afford to break down now. I had to protect her, I had to protect both of us. We weren't going to let this place take us. I grabbed Kelly's hand, trying to drag her toward the nearest door. But before we could reach it, the walls seemed to collapse in on themselves. The lights flickered one last time and then went out. Darkness descended. And the only thing I could hear was the sound of the growling. The sound of something hungry. Then, I felt it, a cold, icy hand grab my shoulder from behind. I spun around, but there was nothing there. Just the darkness, closing in. But I wasn't alone. The whispers started again, a chorus of voices, low and guttural, speaking in tongues I couldn't understand. The walls pulsed, the ground beneath us vibrating. The thing in the shadows was getting closer. I could feel it. "Run, Kelly!" I shouted. But she wasn't moving. Her eyes were wide, staring into the darkness as if something had frozen her in place. And that's when I saw it. A shape emerging from the shadows. Something larger than the others, something more powerful. It was him, the man from the ER. But now, he was a towering figure, his body bloated and swollen, his skin covered in dark veins. His mouth stretched wider than humanly possible, filled with rows upon rows of sharp, jagged teeth. And then, he spoke. "You're mine now." And I realized, too late, that we had already lost. There was no escaping this. There was no way out. This place was our grave. The words echoed in my ears like a death sentence, "You're mine now." I couldn't breathe. My heart pounded against my chest like a wild animal trying to break free. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to fight, to escape, but there was no way out. The hallway had closed in around us, the walls pulsating like the heartbeat of some monstrous creature. There was no more light, just an impenetrable darkness that pressed in from all sides. The creature in front of me, this twisted, monstrous version of the man, took a slow step forward. Its body loomed over us, unnatural and wrong in every way. Its skin was stretched so tight I could see the tendons and muscles underneath. Its eyes, if you could even call them eyes, were nothing but hollow voids. And its mouth. God, its mouth was impossibly wide, a cavernous black hole lined with teeth that seemed to reach out, wanting to swallow us whole. I could hear Kelly beside me, her breathing shallow and frantic. She was shaking, but still standing. Still here. I had to protect her. I couldn't let this thing take her. "Run!" I shouted, the only word I could force past the panic that was paralyzing me. She didn't respond. She was frozen, her eyes locked on the creature in front of us. I grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the nearest exit, any exit, but it was too late. The thing was moving faster now, its long limbs creeping forward with terrifying speed. It was playing with us, toying with us before it struck. And then, everything seemed to shift. The walls around us groaned, a low, mournful sound, like the building itself was in pain. The growl, The deep, resonating growl came again, only this time, it didn't sound like it was coming from the creature in front of us. It was coming from every direction. From the walls, the floor, the ceiling. The hospital was alive. I looked around in desperation, trying to find a way out. My eyes landed on a door at the far end of the hall. It was ajar, just enough to see a sliver of light coming from the other side. My heart skipped a beat. There! I shouted. We can make it. Kelly didn't move. Her eyes were locked on the creature, on the thing that had once been a man. I could see her terror, but she wasn't reacting. I grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her, hard. Kelly! We need to move now. That seemed to snap her out of it. She blinked, her wide eyes focusing on me, and for the briefest moment, I saw a flicker of hope. She nodded, and together, we ran. The thing behind us roared in fury, its voice a horrible mixture of human agony and pure animal rage. We didn't look back. We couldn't. But I could hear it following us, its footsteps pounding the floor, faster now, almost like it was growing, getting larger, more powerful. The door at the end of the hall loomed closer. I pushed Kelly ahead of me, urging her to move faster. The light from the doorway grew brighter, warmer, almost like a beacon. But as we reached it, the door slammed shut. It was locked. No! I screamed. My fist slammed against the door, but it didn't budge. The thing was almost upon us, its growls louder than ever. The walls vibrated again, and this time, the floor beneath our feet felt like it was shaking. The building was alive. It was all part of the nightmare. There was no escape. Not anymore. I turned back toward Kelly, my mind racing, trying to think of something, anything, that could save us. And then I saw it. The window. It was small, a single-pane glass window at the far side of the door. It wasn't much, but it was our only chance. I shoved Kelly back toward it. The window. We can get out through the window. She didn't argue. She just moved, her hands trembling as she tried to pry the window open. The noise from the hallway was deafening now, scraping, growling, thumping, closer, closer, until it sounded like the creature was right behind us. The window finally gave way. I pushed Kelly through first, shoving her out into the cold night air. And then I heard it, the hiss. That same unnatural sound. I turned just in time to see the thing's hand reach through the gap, its claws scraping against the glass. No! I shouted, and with all the strength I had left, I pushed myself through the window after her. We landed hard on the ground outside, the cold night air rushing over me like a shock to the system. I scrambled to my feet, pulling Kelly up with me, and we ran. We ran without looking back. We didn't stop until we were clear of the hospital grounds, until we were far enough away that the nightmare of that place couldn't reach us. I collapsed onto the cold grass, my lungs burning, my body trembling with exhaustion and fear. Kelly was beside me, just as shaken, but alive. We were both alive. But that night, that thing, whatever it was still out there. And it wasn't finished. I could feel it. The shadows of the hospital had followed us, and somehow, I knew that this wasn't over. Not yet. It had marked us. And one thing I knew for sure was that I would never, ever be able to forget the horrors we had witnessed inside that building. The thing that had hunted us, whatever it was still out there, waiting for its next victims. And somehow, I felt like it was just getting started. I don't know if I'll ever be able to shake the memory of that night. Sometimes, I hear noises in the dark. Scratching, tapping, like it's waiting for me, for us, to slip up. It doesn't matter where I go. The fear never leaves. But I survived. We both did. And I'm telling you this now, because I don't want anyone else to have to go through what we did. If you ever find yourself working a night shift in a place like St. Mary's, leave. Just leave. Because whatever is in there, it's not human. And it's never letting go. I thought I could leave it behind, that the nightmare would be over once I stepped outside those hospital gates. But I was wrong. I couldn't escape the memory of that place. The things we saw, the horrors we experienced, they were seared into my mind, like a brand that would never fade. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that twisted man, heard the growl, felt the cold, suffocating